Hey there, Gavin here with another episode of the OneMent Podcast. This is episode 3. If you didn't get to see my first episode with David Hoffmeister, it was wonderful, and my second with Katie B. And today it is with D Day, otherwise known as Dolores, but her friends call her D. And I'll tell you a little bit more about her in a second. But in case this is the first time you have come to my channel, you have watched or listened to a podcast of mine. I'm on YouTube and Spotify and most of the major podcast channels. The OneMent is, in essence, a oneness movement, right? And what does that mean? If you look up the definition of mint, I looked it up, and it's used to form nouns that refer to an action or process or its result. For example, a great achievement, successful management, right? So like anything of action, putting that, at the end of it. So oneness, one mint, right? That's basically what I did in like one moment, oneness movement. And, then it gets into the definition of like, what is oneness? And that's really what we're tackling here. And I feel that it's this spiritual word that is hard to really grasp. What does it look like? How do you live it? How do you feel it? How do you know it? Right? And that's my purpose, is to teach oneness to the world. The understanding that we're not separate, that we're all connected, that there's no duality, right? That there is only one mind, and that we are all love and we are all connected. And I want people to not just understand this conceptually, yet to completely at their fabric know who they really are, to understand it, and then to live that, to be the reflection of that. You can see the madness that's going on in the world right now, right? That it just seems like insanity. Regardless of your viewpoints, there's a lot of contrast, tumultuousness, and it's an interesting time. And I look at that as, the reflection, the projection of like what's within us as a whole, but as also the one mind. And as we take responsibility and become aware of that and see that there are other possibilities, and that possibly that this is all an illusion, and that the truth, not the truth of like what the ego thinks of the truth of right or wrong, but the truth of love, who we really are, of God, the universe, and our connection to source. And as we gain that remembrance, our lives change. We heal. We return to love. And so that's what this podcast is about, is to show what that looks like, to get a better understanding of that. I use a lot of A Course in Miracles information, quotes, teachings, because that's been the most transformational for me. I feel like it's a tremendous teaching that just oozes truth. And yet I'm going to be talking to a lot of people from a lot of different realms, a lot of different, ideas and positions. And together we get to really dive into what oneness is, how we get to like remember it and live from that, and let go of any fear, be in total abundance and joy, and really, wake up together would be one way to describe it. So today is D Day. She is a good friend of mine. We're in the same book club together, which we'll talk about. And I did this interview recently, and the audio and video didn't record at first, but luckily there was a backup. So that's cool. She has so much wisdom. She's a transformational coach. She's a mom, and she's a wife. She's obviously a woman, and so much more, right? Don't want to put any labels on that yet. I'm excited to introduce you to her, and so you get her wisdom and insights and so many powerful stories. Like, wow, like I know you're going to enjoy to hear, what she's been through and where she is now, and how that happened. So without further ado, let's get started. Okay, here we are, Gavin here with the OneMent. So excited to be with my friend Dolores, who goes by D. I'm honored to be one of those friends that knows you by D. And I'm so excited for being here with you and taking the time. How are you?
I am awesome, and I'm so glad and honored to be here. So thank you for the invitation.
For sure. And we just had some technical difficulties in redoing this. One of those things with life. I want to be transparent, like,
Such is life.
Man. So I'm reshifting, right? But also want to let Dee introduce herself in just a second, but thought it'd be fun to share the quick story of how we got to know each other. So we've known each other for a little over a year. And my family, we moved to Florida from California and actually moved to Sarasota. And Dee, somehow I befriended her through A Course in Miracles somehow on Instagram. And she was posting like pictures like, oh, Siesta Key. And so I was like, hey, I'm going to ask her some questions. And then when my wife and I moved here, we got to have coffee with her. And Dee was like, hey, I'm thinking about a book club. And we were like, we are in. We want to do the book club with you. And so we've been doing that for over a year. It's so fun. We will not talk about my first book recommendation. Okay. That is forever a joke. I don't want to say anything disparaging, things about a book or whatever that other people might like. But the book club still gives me, jokes to me about it. But anyway, that's how we met. And I'm so honored to have, been able to connect with you. That book club is sacred to Megan and I. And again, welcome. If you could just tell a little bit about, who you are. You're a transformational coach with women, and a little bit about, what you're about. That'd be great.
Yes. Okay. So thank you. So we need to make sure that we're still recording.
Yes.
That we're not on standby.
We're good.
I appreciate that warm welcome. And yes, so my name is Dee Day. I married into that last name, but everybody calls me Dee. One little bit I wanted to say about how we connected is that, I think we were connected, kind of beautiful synchronicity online on Instagram, which, you can meet hundreds and thousands of people and never have a real connection with somebody. And it was so like beautifully crafted and designed that all of a sudden one day, I learned you're moving to Sarasota, and that's how we build this connection. So there truly is great value to online social media. And, that is one of the ways that we've met, and some of the ways I've met some great, great friends and people. So
yeah, absolutely.
Our book club is wonderful. And my name, originally, like you said, is Dolores, and I go by the name of Dee. I started out had a very painful childhood, like many of us did. I had 5 brothers. And I was the only girl. And that has its own challenges. But what made it quite hard is that my mother and father had a very dysfunctional marriage relationship. It was very hostile. It was very dark. It was very abusive emotionally and physically. I think they both suffered from mental health issues. And being the only girl, and I feel like I suffered a lot because my mom left when I was only 5 years old. She was incarcerated my entire childhood. So a lot of the abuse continued to sort of come this way. And I had a lot of pain. I had a lot of problems, and very sad, spent a lot of my youth in despair, very much alone, suicidal, sad. I was a very sad child. And sort of moving forward, I was born and raised in Indiana. That was another commonality that we had as well, both coming from the cornfields. And I have to mention that we were very poor. There was a lot of poverty in my life. So there was a lot of lack. There was a lack of emotional support, physical support. It just really was a sad, sad time for me. And when I finally had my opportunity to go to college and change, I even changed my name. It was almost like I wanted a complete severing of the old, and I really wanted to create new. I think I did that sort of on a unconscious level, Gavin. And it just sort of was like, how do I get rid of this and start all over? And I was like, all right, I'm just going to go by D. And I started over, and I really started to shift a lot of my paradigms slowly. These were not overnight shifts. I went to school for sports medicine, and I came out on the other side, and I like to say serendipitously. There is no coincidences in life. I don't believe that. But found my way to Sarasota, Florida on a island called Siesta Key. It is one of a kind. It truly is a
So
healing
beautiful.
mecca, a healing mecca. And you can
Yeah.
look that up. It's called the Second Sedona. I was a young, naive, 20-some-year-old girl that didn't even know Sarasota was on the Gulf of Mexico. So I did not choose this place. This place
Yeah.
chose me.
There we
And
go.
I moved down here and started making my waves through fitness and health, and met my husband. He had two children, and then we had two other children. I continued to stay in health and fitness and wellness well into my 40s. And in fact, we still own a gym on this very island that I adore very much, that we run and operate to our local community. And I've spent the last 25 of my years training fitness, health, wellness, only women. And I started to shift my business when I was about 39 years old. I went into learning more about plant medicine. That really got me intrigued. I started to remember a little bit who I was. I love to learn. I love to grow. Those are things that I'd kind of forgotten through motherhood because we get so
Yeah.
busy in life. And that
Right.
becomes our main priority, which, by the way, it still is my main priority. But, as they got a little older and I started to get a little bit of, what I loved back into my life, I had a little bit of remembering and how much I love to learn. And I started to foster that. And so for me, what happened is I kind of met into a crossroads, and I was working with a company called doTERRA at the same time, which paired really well with, fitness and then
Yeah.
wellness and teaching people how to live a non-toxic life. And then what really happened in that business, which I say is actually disguised as a personal growth development business, is I sort of see it as I almost had two ways to choose from. I could go the Tony Robbins way, which, by the way, is great, and it's very
Yeah.
much personal motivation, or I could go what I call the Wayne Dyer way, which is certainly, a man of the father of motivation. I think he was coined by Oprah, but it was a very more spiritual way.
Yeah.
And I started to feel who I was a little bit more, going back to that place, remembering who I was. And I've always been spiritual, Gavin. So I've never lost that. In fact, my heart, I've always led with my spirituality. But I let sort of religion get in the way of some of those things.
Yeah.
And it started to build layers on, just who I was, the understanding of the world and my belief systems and things like that. And so I chose that, and sort of like with the book club, I became obsessed with reading, obsessed to the point where I would be reading 7 or 8 books at a time. And all the while I'm still fitness coaching, but I'm starting to, I say, remember. At first I thought I was learning, but then I started realizing that I was remembering all of these things that I had forgotten, just really about life. And all of them were spiritual related or quantum physics related. I mean, the gamut of spirituality and science started to flood into my life as religion sort of took a back seat. And I realized I wanted to sort of remove any kind of false traditions, any dogma, anything that was not truthful or didn't serve the higher consciousness that I was trying to achieve. And it was then really that I began to understand that, I mean, here I am, a 40-year-old woman, a mother of 4 kids at the time. And I really started to understand that I wasn't a body, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that was, I know for some that may seem like, what? But I've made it to 40 years old in health and fitness, teaching people how to use their body, feel good in their body. And I'm just now really realizing at 40 years old that I'm not this flesh and bones, really. Like, I knew I had a spiritual essence, but there was so much more that had been sort of covered up that I didn't really understand. So my love for learning could not be quenched. And I just drowned myself in anything that I could absorb to soak up to help me to remember things.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where you find me today. I'm still a 44-year-old, mother, happily married of 20 years. And I do have a great life. But I think what's really important to understand, I call myself a transformational coach because in I call my first life, it was teaching people how to change their form, right? Their body. And now I've birthed something completely different because I understand what I didn't know then. And I didn't have the vernacular to really understand these concepts, but that, we have a body, we're not our body. We have a mind, we're not our mind. We are our soul essence. So it took me so long to sort of tap into that because I had to undo and release all of these belief systems and all these patterns that I had adopted, my whole childhood and even into my 20s. Religion had a hand of that, society, culture of where I came from. And once I started to drop those things, freedom really started to flood my life, real joy. I think it's worthy of noting that my personal transformation, my personal experience is what I feel gives me the greatest understanding and ability to be able to help another woman, because I came from a place of poverty, lack, mindsets of not good enough, not worthy enough,
Right.
just bad. And then, able to do all this personal work, which I took on with a fervent desire to transform not into something better, but to who I really was, to get rid of anything that wasn't true or wasn't serving me. So, I kind of removed poverty with abundance in all areas, by the way, emotionally, physically, financially, all of those things began to manifest in my life. I began to understand things that I had never understood before because I wanted to choose, for me, a spiritual scientific path that didn't have to do with religious ties. So
Yeah.
here I am today.
That's awesome. There's so many things you said there. On your website, you say mind, body, soul, empowering coach.
Mm-hmm.
And, with the body, it's like, I feel there's nothing wrong with like being in shape and eating healthy and taking care of our bodies. Yet I also feel like we so often use that as like a distraction of like our true purpose, who we really are, our feelings. So we just pour everything into the body. And one of the ways we can do it is through health.
Yes.
And I know my wife and I, like, we're really into health, as you
Mhm.
are. Yet that can be one of the ways of like, okay, we're all about, our body health rather
Yes.
than like kind of the soul health and like
Yes.
the true essence of us. So that's an interesting, like, obviously I think when we're younger too,
Mhm.
it's just more natural to be focused on our body. And so, you were into fitness, and it's neat to hear your story, how you've, transformed into or evolved into other aspects and kind of encompass all of it in a way that like is really beneficial for women. So
Yes.
totally, I appreciate you sharing that, like how you got to this point in your journey. So I always ask at least a couple of questions that are the same. The OneMent, a little bit about.
Mhm.
It's a oneness movement, wearing my Only Love shirt. And by the way, like,
Mhm.
let me know what t-shirt you want. It's one of
Yes.
the things for being on the show. I'm going to put all of Dee's, like, her website, her Instagram, anything else that she wants me to put on there for the notes. And I'll have the Shopify to the OneMint site. But the
Mhm.
question I would like to ask you is, what is your definition of oneness? Like, when you think of oneness, like, what comes to mind?
Yeah. Well, first of all, once again, oneness was not in my vocabulary 20 years ago, maybe even 30 years ago. So this
Mm,
is sort of a new concept for me. I know, crazy, right? That I would make it into my 40s and not have ever, what I say, have a spiritual experience that really embodies the idea of oneness. So for me, I think it's almost crucial that I go back to the beginning of my life to actually explain where my definition has derived from. Um, I did live a very life filled being alone. I felt like I was in despair. I was without a mother. It's important to add that at that time, um, my mother actually, had a very, I would say, a graphic thing happen with us where, she was having an affair. This is very important to the story. She was having an affair, and my father was, also sort of mentally sick and physically abusive and emotionally riding on my mother, who had lost a child, and who also at that time was pregnant. This is important in the story because, in the sense, she made a huge mistake, and she killed a man who she was having an affair with. And now this is very important to this story.
Didn't know any of this.
I know.
When you said that, that she had gone to prison, didn't know that either.
Yes. So it's not something that I lead with, right? Because it is something that I suffered with. I suffered this shame. Now, as you can understand, I came from a pretty small town. Everybody knew about this. This was on television. This was in the papers. We were the Smith family. We were the poor kids. This was, they're the child of that mother who did that. And it was sorrow filled, because not only did I lose my mom, but I had the shame of feeling like I was bad. I had the angst of like the anger of my father at that time. I felt very alone. I felt very sad. I felt very disconnected. I think the proper word here is I felt separate of the world.
Yeah.
I didn't feel good enough. I felt very alone. Now, back then, 30 years ago, I wouldn't have ever said, I had a mental health issue, but it is a mental health issue because I felt very separate of everything, which brought me to suicidal thoughts, suicidal actions. I was not a happy girl. I was very sad. Why? Because I had a lack of love in my life. It truly was absent. And what happened is, as I grew and as I took this on and as I began to feed myself spiritually and really connect to who I was created from, I started to have an overwhelming connection of the polarity of that separation, which is connection, oneness, unity, love. Yeah. And so my heart started to shift and change, and miracles did start to happen because I was having a shift in perception. Now, I think it's important to say I haven't made like this total transformation. I still have moments where I go back, right? And I feel separate, and then I have to we're human, and I have to revisit these things and go, no, but that's not the truth. This is the truth. That's only my ego painting an illusion. But so oneness for me, as a definition, has truly been an experience that I've lived, coming from a place where my mind believed the illusion of separation. It believed judgment. It believed fear, because I wasn't seeing it in my life. And as I got older and I started to, take in what I call higher truths and wisdom, and I began to experience it in my life, I believe that oneness is the realization that we really are all connected. There's a beautiful tapestry. It's a spiritual tapestry that the vision of our sense of eyes or ears cannot show us, but it's a spiritual energy and tapestry that is behind what we actually see that connects every single one of us together. And, if you even look at, and I've studied the religions, they all say the same thing. What you do to another, you do unto yourself, right? Because I think really at our core, religion or not, we all know deep down that we are connected. So oneness for me is truth. It is the light of love that unifies all of our spiritual essences together.
I love that. And I appreciate you sharing it. I always want to ask that question because it's something that I think most spiritual students really gravitate towards, is the concept of oneness. Almost, it's referenced in just about every spiritual book. Yet it's kind of like, how do you bottle it up? What does it look like to live oneness? What does it look like to experience oneness? And that's, what this podcast is a lot about, is really uncovering that and showing people what's possible. And so I thought it's really cool that you went back in your story of like how you were feeling, which so many people, especially so many women, can relate to, of not feeling loved, feeling separated. Your mom, that's a tumultuous, oh my gosh, Dee, like my heart goes out to you. Like, wow. It's like, and it's also just the transformation of like
Yeah.
then to now. Like I know
Yeah,
you as like now,
I know.
and it's like this
Right.
loving, beaming person of light and authenticity and transparency and giving. Like he's just an amazing person that I get to like, call a friend. Yet, like your past, like so much of us, wasn't easy.
No, it was the contrast of it. It
Yeah.
actually was the contrast of love and oneness and joy, which I think people, this is one of those don't judge a book by the cover, is like, my son says, I never stop smiling. And it's because I had the opposite. I had the polarity of crying myself to sleep every night as a little girl, of feeling feelings of true despair. And these words, I don't even recognize them anymore because I've done the personal work to slowly work through a lot of those, traumas that I've had. And that's why I think, I believe that with our pain, there is a purpose. And what I personally was able to develop tools for to heal myself, heal my body, heal my soul, nurture my soul, and to heal my mind and bring it back to wholeness and back to truth. That didn't happen overnight. That took a concerted effort of developing tools, developing practices, utilizing, integrate them into my life so that now I have that ability to step forward and say, I know where you've been. I know what that feels like. There's hope. There is another way. Doesn't happen overnight. This isn't like
Yeah.
magic. Like I'm gonna, do a,
Sure.
deck of cards and have magic. But if you put in the work and the practices, you can shift your life. And it means you have to learn how to nurture and nourish your mind, your body, which is important, right? Just going back, I mean, how we experience our life. I know really many spiritual people that struggle with that side. They have an unhealthy form. So even though we shouldn't identify our self, our true self with our form, our experience in this life is determined by whether or not our temple or this vehicle, this instrument, if you will, can run properly, right?
Right.
And then also, nurturing your truest essence, your soul. So I feel like my personal journey from pain to where it is now, first of all, I'm so grateful. I mean, thank you for all the
That's
shifts and
what
the changes
I
in
was
my
gonna
life,
ask
right?
you. Yeah, is like, do you
Oh, yeah.
have it's kind of a bold question, but do you have gratitude around that? Like, would you be as happy and would you be who you are today without those experiences?
No. And first of all, I'm going to tell you the first word that comes to my mind as soon as I open my eyes in the morning when I wake up, sometimes before I open my eyes, really, is thank you, thank you, thank you. I say
Yeah.
it 3 times. I think it's very powerful when you say things 3 times. And I'm like, thank you, thank you, thank you. Because the realization that you can create something new. When I say I'm an empowerment coach, I don't give people power. I show people their own power. I show that it's already within them. I give them the tools. I help encourage and inspire them to use the tools and do the practice and show up for themselves. But the power is already within them to change their energy, change their vibration so that they too can experience a completely different life. And yeah, my smile is, I mean, again, sometimes life happens to us, but then I also have the tools to be able to quickly return to what I say my natural state is very quickly. It doesn't, turn into a day, a week, a month, a mood, a habit, a
What
personal, I'm
what
able to shift very quickly.
Absolutely. And what are some of those tools? Like, I know you're a Course in Miracles student. We've had those
Yes.
discussion, but like most of us, that's not like the only thing, right? So what are some of the tools that are your go-tos on a daily basis?
Well, I think the most important part in my journey was understanding that we are energetic beings. Okay. We have a vibration, positive, negative, and that certain things that we participate in have a higher vibrational energy about them, and some have lower. So when I began to like really start to dive in and understand quantum physics and just in general, um, energy in life, then I started to go, okay, is this positive or negative? Does this serve my higher good? Does it not serve my higher good? And I started to learn the things that were highly energetic, and I began to participate in those things more. As a consequence, the things that were lower had what I would deem as a lower energetic frequency, they started to fall away. So again, I never focus on the negative. I know that it's there. Contrast is important, but I always focus on the things that are higher vibrational. That could be people. That could be words. I believe, just saying the word yes has a higher vibration than the word no, right? Whether that's in our mind or not, it doesn't matter.
Right.
It's what we participate in. Eating foods that are green and whole and from the ground versus dead, denatured, processed foods. Listening to music, which is a biggie for me. Listening to music that is inspirational and high vibrational versus, and I'm not trying to put anything down, but for me, the headbanging and the rap is a little lower vibrational for me.
I mean, I have judgment around heavy metal music. I don't get it. I'll just say some people, that's their vibration. I don't understand, but no, I hear you.
Exactly. And maybe they deem it as higher vibration. Sitting in the sun. I'm huge in earthing. I believe in laying on the grass, walking through nature. These are simple tools, by the way, Gavin. These aren't like I'm going to give you some revelational thing, but I'm a coach.
Yeah.
So just like an NFL coach helps train their offense and their defense, get ready for game day, I help people learn these things and then implement them in their life. And things that have a higher vibration pull things that have a lower vibration up. So again, this wasn't a one and done. This is a daily effort. This is talking about sort of spiritual practices. Every morning when I get up, I put God first. First thing, thank you, thank you, thank you. Gratitude is one of the biggest parts of my spiritual practices because I believe that gratitude is synonymous with the word love. That energy of love. And love is the highest vibrational energy there is. So whenever you're putting love and gratitude into something, you're naturally going to feel good because you can't be grateful for something and then at the same time, be upset about the lack of something else. The two don't coexist together. So I try to spend a lot of my time in the morning reading powerful words, whether it's A Course in Miracles. I mean, I run the gamut, right? I can run from Deepak Chopra to books. I'm reading the Tibetan book of the dead and the living. I mean, I am not closed-minded to anything. As a matter of fact, Wayne Dyer, who was my first teacher, really, my first spiritual teacher, he said, have a mind that is open to everything and attached to nothing. Now, I think it's very important that I sort of weave in here, though, is that I always pray for the Holy Spirit or for the truth to keep me protected from anything that is not of value to me. Maybe that would change, but not of value to me, and serve me only with what, I need to learn and know at the time. But I get up in the morning, I, have my tea.
Yeah. What's your morning ritual?
Music. Yes. Oh, this is my favorite question because I literally, and I'm not joking about this, I have pictures. My husband can tell you, I believe to literally go into a spiritual closet. So I like quietness. I have a couple kids. For me, and I have a beautiful office, but for me, I love darkness. So I literally go into my closet. I have a beautiful meditation cushion. I read, I use some oils. I have a sound, like a little sound bowl. I pray, I meditate. Sometimes I do Reiki. Sometimes I do some tapping to release any blocks and fears and things that I have. I start gratitude practice. I pray. Now, again, I know I'm giving you a lot of things, but there's no like real rhythm per se.
Yeah.
I meditate. Meditate is very important in the morning. And sometimes meditation is just sitting still for 3 minutes. And sometimes meditation looks like 25 minutes. So it's truly dependent on how much time I have. But I always get quiet because, again, I was raised, from a Methodist Catholic sort of foundation. And so the word meditate was sort of like airy fairy or like voodoo. Ooh, that's not good. And as I began to grow spiritually, I started to understand, for me anyways, meditate is the other half of the conversation. When I pray, I'm talking to source. When I'm quiet, I'm able to hear the whisper of God to me, whisper what I need to know.
That's very cool.
This is the hardest part for me because I'm a doer. I like to act and move. But I would actually say that this is the most important part of my spiritual practice, even though I'm not doing, my gratitude or my I am, but sitting there being super quiet is super important to me. So I read, I pray, I meditate, and then again, fulfilling the other part of it, I get up and then I move. I move in the day. And a lot of times I listen to a podcast. So I'm so excited about your podcast, Gavin, because I usually use my morning exercise time as still a time to learn or listen to music.
And it seems
that's really important.
It seems like you find your way to the ocean most days. Like, there's pictures on Instagram a lot, which is so cool. There's something so connecting, so sacred, so special about the ocean, especially Siesta Key.
Very therapeutic. If anybody's never been, look it up. White crystal sands. It is beautiful. And the ocean is really important to me. I would say maybe a metaphor. I do believe now, doesn't matter what race, religion, sex, anything in life that you would label yourself as, we are all a drop in the ocean and God is the ocean. So there's part of me, I think metaphorically even, that feels so spiritually connected when I'm in that space. Not only do I feel, serenity and peace and the beauty, of course, from the senses of the eyes and the ears, but there's also that metaphorical understanding that God is in everything. And when you're looking at the vast ocean, you can't help but have these feelings of like that you are connected to a benevolent God of all things.
I love that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So couple other questions. I want to get into coaching a little bit. Yet I'd love to hear. Now, I mentioned, hey, there's some things I want to talk about, but there's a couple things I held back. So, what would you say have been some of your biggest fears that you used to have in the past that you've maybe noticed recently they're just no longer there? Like, what's something when you were younger that you used to fear that you no longer fear?
Well, definitely poverty, lack, not having enough. Again, destitute. When I was younger, there were days that we didn't have lunch money. There were days that between 5 mouths, we barely ate breakfast, or we're all hungry. I wore hand-me-downs, boy hand-me-downs at that, by the way. So there was always this fear, that there wouldn't be enough, or that, I wouldn't be, that whole comparison, oh, she's better because she has those things and I have less things. So there was honest, and I have to say, Gavin, I can't honestly say that I've overcome all of these things. I don't believe that would be a fair assessment or true to say. But what I would say is that the things that I struggle with the most are what I call the comparison trap, comparing myself with other people. And by the way, maybe other people do, I never compare myself with other people and go, I'm better. I always compare myself with other people and be like, you are not enough. You are not good enough. You're a loser, self-deprecating things. And I think I did that a lot more in my teens for sure. And definitely in my 20s, right? And part of that is self-image and that's growing, but part of it is because I had forgotten my true essence of who I was. And so the fear of not having enough, so fear of lack, comparison trap, and the what I call the not good enough prison, living in a prison every day that you don't look good enough, you're not smart enough, which was big for me, by the way, because I had another issue when I was younger, we won't get into, but I had a surgery and it put me back in kindergarten, and I wasn't a super smart child. So I struggled my whole life with learning and trying to prove myself with my grades that I was smart enough, that I was intellectual enough. And so for me, it's trying to get myself out of that, am I good enough prison? And I can't say that I've overcome them. What I can say is I'm a work in progress. I'm aware of these things now, which is the first step. Because if you're not aware of them, then you can't call them out as a liar. You can't call them out as, the habits and the repetitive patterns of the ego. So once you build that awareness, then you can be like, oh, I see what you're doing. No, that's not the truth. And then you have a chance to be able to rewrite a different narrative. But until you're consciously aware of it, you just repeat yourself over and over again.
Exactly. Well, it's interesting with some things you said with fear. There might be a lot of things that we overcome in a way that it's just not as big of a part of our life, but there always does seem to be like that residue that can just like pop up, and you're just like, oh, I didn't know that was there, right? And then to have that awareness, like you're saying. Also, something that came to mind when you were sharing, like, in kindergarten, and it's okay if you tell that story, but like with that surgery that held you back. I feel like, even with your upbringing and your brothers and your mom and your dad, that like, I feel like so often life mirrors what we kind of like believe about ourselves. Okay. Yeah. And then, but it's almost like all these things that we're not, right? And like, as we go on, there's this part of us, you could call it our soul, our inner knowing, our, higher consciousness, that is like all along going, something just doesn't seem right. Like this, I don't think this is who I really am. And like through life, all these things showing up that are not who we are, then kind of wake us up to the possibility of then what are we really, right? And I do feel like sometimes people who don't really ever have the struggle, or don't have the dark night of the soul, or don't have tragedies, or whatever most people would label as negative, then life is just good enough that they're not ever pushed in that direction of looking deeper, of really understanding like there's more to it. Who am I really? So we have all struggled, for all those just listening to your stories, for all of us, that when we look at our story as the opportunity to kind of wake up, to see, to be aware, and then to like dive into, like you are, of who you really are, like you're a representation of possibility, right? And so that's why I love doing these podcasts and hearing these stories. And I want to hear, what was the surgery?
Yeah. Okay. Well, this is really important. So thank you for sharing that, that I could be a representative of the image of potential and what is possible. As a matter of fact, it's very important to me. One of the biggest changes, mind shift changes, that came to me after really, all the personal work that I've done, is living in a place of potentiality, understanding that really all things are possible, being in a place where you feel free and unlimited. I don't know really 100% where I was going with that, but this is where I was going, is that I have so many people, because I believe that we can learn vicariously so much from other people. Yeah. I make it a point every single day, Gavin, to hear somebody else's story, whatever it is, because I know there's something to learn from that. There's some kind of information that I can benefit from, that they're willing to share with me and everybody. So I just know that we all have a responsibility to show up in some way and share what we've gone through. It's all the same. It's maybe a different story, but it's some type of struggle, some type of conflict. And then how did you, heal, recover, find a new way, a new possibility that will help somebody. So your voice can always help somebody. And so for me, obviously we don't think that we came down to this earth to suffer things, but perhaps we did, so that we could learn and grow. And I will tell you, one of my favorite things, I used to think that we all came here and life is a classroom, right? It's not a courtroom, it's a classroom. That took a long time, because in the religious world, I believed it was a courtroom. You're bad, you're wrong, you're right. And now I'm going, okay, life is
you go to heaven,
right?
You go to hell.
You go to hell, you go to hell. I spent a long time of my life going, oh my God, I'm going to hell. Like, I'm going to a fiery pit. And by the way, I will tell you, I was a good girl. Like I did some things right, but nothing like that, right? And I spent a long time of my mind suffering that I was going to a bad place because I wasn't good enough. And children in today's society are going through the same thing. I'm no different. And that's where we have to stop this, narrative, like you're good, you're bad, you're going to hell, because that affects the mental health the self-image of the child and how they behave, because it's what they believe about themselves. You can't outrun your self-image. Whatever you believe about yourself, you're going to act out in life, until perhaps you are either inspired or you get to the bottom of the bottom, like you said, in a dark night soul, and then something shifts and changes. But nobody wants that in their life, right? You either change because you're, inspired, or you're literally desperate and nobody wants to be there. So, for me, I truly found openings in my life to shift and change. And thank God that I did. But going back to your question about what happened when I was younger, I had, around the time of some of the issues with, my mom and dad, this was before, she actually committed that crime. I had a hematoma that was very big. It was about the size of an apple behind my ear. And so it was really big deal. And the interesting part about
So wait a second, it was just like a lump? I don't know what that is.
Yeah, so it's like a huge blood clot, kind of like a blood tumor, and it's behind your ear. Well, it sits on your brain,
sounds
right?
dangerous.
So that's a little dangerous, right? Dangerous, because obviously if it explodes in your head, you're having a huge hemorrhage. Obviously, that creates more complications. So it was an urgent matter. And it was also urgent that they take care of it. Now, I think it's worthy of saying I do have some circulation issues. I have Raynaud's disease. So I don't really know where this came from, but I believe that most disease comes from emotional issues. So as a child, as you can imagine, all the trauma that was going on in my life, this manifests. It had to be treated. I went through surgery. I missed, I don't even know, a couple months of school, right? And so I was behind. Keep in mind, it was back in the day, my mom, she wasn't teaching me ABCs. I mean, I wasn't the smartest, crayon in the whole pack. So my dad said, no, she's still going to go on. So I was not only the youngest, but I was behind. There was this constant struggle, right? And I think even as a second child, there's this constant gotta try to keep up. I gotta try to do better. I'm gonna say something. I always knew something happened in that waiting. In when I went under consciously and I saw the nurse, there was some part of me, Gavin, that always knew something happened in that room, but I didn't know what. It wasn't until I went to hypnotherapy school and we did a regression and I went back into that moment that I had a remembering of what happened.
Now, what happened, Dee? Tell us what happened.
Right. So what happened? What's really important to understand is that I am, my husband can attest, in a very sort of odd way, which I am going to say this. I not only do I promote it, but I think everybody would be the wiser if they listened to multiple near-death accounts. And here's why. There's much to be learned. There's much to be learned and gleaned from people's experiences where they meet death. Not everybody has one, but I became obsessed over the last several years. But something in the back of my psyche wanted to know why. What happened to me that I'm still thinking about, because this is also important to note, and I got to get the sun on my eyes for a second. It's also important to note is that I actually don't have a great memory. I believe the memories are there, subconscious, but you can ask my husband. It's one of my greatest gifts and one of the worst curses is that I don't recollect a lot. I very much live in the now, which, again, is a gift because I don't revisit the past. But for some reason, Gavin, there was something that would always bring me back to this memory and this darkness. When I was in hypnotherapy school, which wasn't quite too long ago, again, beautiful, divine, synchronistic events that happened, I did a regression, and the regression led me back to the child, and I popped out of my body, and I was in the room, and I was seeing this little girl on the table, and I was feeling the emotions of the nurse. I was feeling the emotions of the doctor. I knew that there was something more. And I did not have a near-death experience. That's important to know. I didn't see, any angels or anything. But what is important is I always knew something about that moment. And I will tell you, I was very spiritual as a child. What that means is I didn't, my dad, once every 6 months would drop us off at the Methodist, church steps and tell us to go in for an hour and then he'd come pick us up. But I always had a Bible. I always talked to Jesus. I would meet him in the park before I went to bed. I would have these different visions. Why, I don't know, but I believe in my heart that probably, that moment in time was important to give me a different opening and a consciousness and experience of something bigger. Now, again, I didn't have a remembrance of it. It was buried deep down in my subconscious mind. But that's the beauty of hypnotherapy, that if you're ready to reveal something, it's almost like you open up that library and here's that book. And I was able to recall it. I was able to feel it. And then I was able to dialogue and have a conversation with God during my therapy session. Why? Why did this happen? Why did I have this experience? Why was I supposed to be sick and then, have that? And, I don't want to share like the whole thing because we'd be here for a while, but my dialogue with God, my higher self, was that this was important because this was my spiritual opening to help me understand that I wasn't alone. There was more, that we were always connected, and that there's things that we cannot see with our eyes that are more real than with our eyes. At 5, I didn't understand this. Even at 5, I wouldn't have been able to understand it, even if I had remembered it. And by the way, there was nobody there in my life at that time to be able to help me, explain it and have some kind of understanding anyways. So it wasn't until I was able to reveal it at an older time to be able to metabolize and understand, wow, I get it. And to this day, and that wasn't that long ago that I had that hypnotherapy session that was very therapeutic. But to this day, I am changed, just like I was with the Course in Miracles and reading that book several times. I am changed by listening to personal accounts of their experience, which are all different, by the way. None are alike completely, but of people's experience with the other realm, the real realm, if you will. And so, I don't know my fascination, but I think it's almost paramount that I mention that I think I did have, some type of a OBE, they call them, out of body experience as a young child.
So obviously the surgery went well. And was it a long recovery period?
Again, my memory doesn't serve me on those specific answers. It's just that I got better. My mom did what she did, and then I, was obviously very much alone the rest of my life. I'm assuming, that I'm better. I have to be, I'm certainly very careful with circulation.
Is that so that experience happened right before your mom committed that crime? Okay. So
yeah, I don't know the time frame, but it's pretty close.
First of all, I can't believe you were going to gloss over. That's a fascinating story. Come on now. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, right.
But it's, to me, like, I feel like God was like, hey, D, it's good. We're good. Like, what's coming up? I've got your back. Right. And like all is well.
Always.
And my wife, like Megan and I, we watch those ND videos all the time because they are such like, they always make us cry. We always cry, right? Because there's something about that like what they say, like it just speaks truth. And it's such a reminder that like all is well. And I know like one of my things with the OneMent and purposes in life is to kind of be like the constant reminder that all is well, everything's going to be okay. One of the t-shirts is everything's going to be okay. There's a Jeff Bridges movie where I forget the name of it, but he was, I don't want to do a spoiler, but he was on a flight that went down and everybody was just terrified, right? And everybody's crying. They all know they're going to die. And he was just going around and like looking at people like saying, everything's going to be okay. Right. Like, and there's more to it why he was doing that. But anyway, I think that's what was happening to you that day is like, everything's going to be okay.
Yeah.
And it's really cool in hypnotherapy that you were able to kind of like go back to that and remember that and get to experience that, because it goes along with the assurance of God and what's there if we choose to remember it, which is a word you've used a lot today.
Yeah, absolutely. And I always say, I do believe this, everybody wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to go today. You know what I mean? Because I believe in our life, this really is a field trip. This is a field trip. When you're in school, you're excited. You're excited because you get to go to a field trip on Friday. I believe coming to Earth is our opportunity to have a field trip. It's up to us to enjoy it or not enjoy it. And so, I think it's really important to understand that, we all want to go to that realm, but if it's not our time and we wake up today, Gavin, it's because that we're not done here. There is more that we need to share. There is more people we need to love. There is more service that needs to be done, whether it's for ourselves or for other people. And, we need to enjoy this field trip as much as possible. And, one of the things that I often say to a lot of my clients is what you focus on expands. If we're focusing on the bad, if we're focusing on the problem, that's what's going to come to you. So whatever you're focusing on, and that's why this whole shift in perception, let's focus on solutions. Let's focus on the positive. And then before you know it, you're experiencing those very things. So, so much of life is, okay, we're on this field trip. Are we going to focus on the beauty, on what we're grateful for what we do have? Or are we going to focus our minds on the lack, what we don't have? This is not to deny that there are not bad things happen in our life, but it's the attitude. It's the, our beingness. Who are we going to be in those circumstances?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Are we going to be the one that's on the plane ride that's going, it's going to be okay, you're loved, you're perfect, everything is going to be fine? Or are we going to be the one screaming going, I know who I want to be. And I choose to be, if it was Jeff Bridges, I choose to be that guy, that woman.
Yeah. And I'm with you. I was watching it with Megan and my other daughter, and I uncontrollably started sobbing, like in that scene. And I was just like, I couldn't even talk. I'm like, oh, you know what's wrong with me, right? But it really spoke to me in many ways. And I like to think that the possibility of what heaven really is possible on earth, right? That that we can experience, that we are God, that we are loved, and that what we think our eyes are seeing is not the truth, right? And that as we uncover the layers of love and remove that illusion, that more and more we can see other people in the unity and what's real in the world and experience oneness, experience heaven on earth. And I feel like that's what Jesus' message was and is, right?
Yeah.
And always has been and always will be. And that, we're in this physical form of contrast and space and time that it feels like that's real. But even in form, we can have the knowing that all is well and that we're actually there's really no difference from what we consider heaven up there and heaven down here, besides how our mind, accepts it and
wants to perceive it. Yeah.
So, okay. Yeah. So, this is another one. So my kids are in high school and one in college. Your kids are in elementary and middle school. Is that correct? Okay.
Yes. So the span is from 8 all the way up to 27.
That's right. Between yep. So you've been doing this for a while, this whole parenting thing. So I feel like as we both consider ourselves spiritual students, what are you and your husband what's your strategy, so to speak, of raising spiritual kids? Or not that they have to be spiritual, but in the form of spirituality, how are you doing parenting?
Well, first of all, I have to say in today's society, I do think that's a tough one, right? I think mostly as I try to foster in my children, really we have one rule in our house. We do all things in love. I think that if you are doing that, then you can't go wrong. You've covered it all, right? We
I
do
love
all
it.
things in love. And so my question with my kids is, was that loving and kind? Could you have chosen a more loving action? I think that the thing in life is, and even Mother Teresa talks about, if you want peace in the world, start at home, right? So for me, peace is very important, cultivating peace and love and unity. And I try to adopt with the kids, good communication skills that talk about that really foster understanding. What did you mean by that? What do you want to share? How are you feeling? Could we say that in a different way? As far as like religions or anything, I want to be very careful because all the things
Yeah.
that I've learned about the subconscious mind and the conscious mind is I don't want to pattern them with adopting my beliefs or other people's beliefs or a culture. I want to be very careful to give them a blank canvas so that they can be a truth seeker, so that they can have their own relationship with God. So that, I will tell you, we do read, almost every single night together. There, a lot of times they're Holy Scripture stories or something positive. We pray every single night. We hold hands. We do that at the table. And I think prayer is a very important part of communion with God. So I think it's very important to help craft that into our life together as a family, but also help them understand that they have to develop their own individual relationship with source, universe. And we talk about anything. We pray for people. That is really
I
the
love
extent
that.
within
Yeah.
our family. So we don't really participate in any religions per se. But what is important is that for me, oneness, unity starts by helping them understand that it's never okay to judge. The acceptance, the understanding, and the no judgment starts
Yeah.
here in our heart. You didn't have to go to church to do that. You didn't have to go someplace and worship. You can go in your own spiritual closet within and choose that. And so, I know that's sort of a
No, that's
roundabout. It's not necessarily very specific.
so many wonderful things there. And at the end of the day, I feel like parenting is like how we live our lives. What's the example we're setting? And I mean,
Yeah.
like,
How we model.
your sons are watching what you and your husband are doing, and like
Yep.
you all both are in on life, right? You're both in on love, right? And
Totally.
and I know, like, and my wife in a lot of ways can relate to. I mean, she had a different childhood than you, but ultimately, you grew up in a environment that lacked love, right? And now
Yeah, that was racist,
you've
by the way, and hateful.
created like the
Yeah,
exact opposite
opposite.
that just harbors, like, it's a complete environment of empowerment, of love, of possibility, of who they really
Right.
are. And um,
Right.
I say good job. I mean, I know more of the
Yeah.
story than other people, but it's really, really
Right. Right.
cool.
No, it's truly like I lived a horror story, and I was like, now that I'm older, now what kind of book do I
Yeah.
want to author? And it really did become about that. And that's a lot of the work that I do with women is like, what's your story? What do you want your story to be? What do you want your story to look like? Let's write it.
Yeah.
Let's make it now. You get to be the author and co-create that with the universe. And so for me, there's a great line. It says, what you do speaks so loudly, I cannot hear what you say. And I believe that so strongly with my kids. It's not enough for me to say, you have to be kind. They have to go see
Right.
me be kind. They have to go see me serve and love other people because that's where it starts. Serving them, loving them, honoring their voice, honoring their soul's choices. I don't know what's best for them. I mean, obviously, I know not to touch fire, but you know what I'm saying? Their soul already has the energetic blueprint to know exactly what they should be doing in their lifetime, what their purpose is, what their mission is. I wasn't given that. We each individually was given that. So I see my job really to be a lighthouse and just to continue to foster love and light and truth, which means you can't, where there's hatred and fear, there's not love. So it's eradicating judgment. It's eradicating all fears of, things that we don't understand necessarily or know. That doesn't make them,
Right. Absolutely.
bad
And
per se.
give you feedback. You're doing a tremendous job in all those areas. Neat kids and neat life you've created for sure. So a couple you mentioned, I want to go there, like coaching. Tell us a little bit more
Yeah.
about like how you serve the women that you coach. How do you do that?
Yes. Okay. So my approach is what I call working on the whole self. I really work with a woman on helping them understand how the mind works and how they can use their mind as a tool to create the life they love. That's one section. The other section is body. I teach them how to create a better tool, a better
Yeah.
instrument so that they can experience a better body. What creates well being? So there's education, there's teaching, and then helping them implement everything from movement, which is
Yeah.
super important, to healthier food options, to getting rid of toxins that are literally flooding our body system and
Yeah.
causing decay. And then soul, helping them really get in touch with their essence of who they are, helping them create spiritual practices. So it's multidimensional, Gavin. It's not just like, which it was for 20 years. Hey, I'm a fitness coach. Come here. I'm going to walk you through the steps of a workout. It's really helping them on all aspects, helping them develop a spiritual practice and getting back and sitting, watching them experience their own personal journey of evolution, because everybody has a
Right.
different one. They no
Yeah.
two look alike. You know what? One way may be for me, it may be A Course in Miracles. Another's maybe, a Buddhist monk, whatever. However it is that serves them to get in touch with their true self and God, their creator, source, universe, whatever vernacular a person wants to use to, say the energy of all things, you know, whatever. And so for me, it's really being able to hold somebody's hand. I don't push people. I hold somebody's hand, I give them the tools, and then we sort of walk together. So we do one-on-one personal coaching. It is important to say that, now I understand through my teaching and learning through going to school, I understand the power of the subconscious mind and how, our minds literally hide trauma, but that energetic charge is
Right.
still within the body. So hypnotherapy has helped me be another tool that I can help a woman go into their subconscious mind, find that event, heal that event through love, by the way. Just, I don't know, coincidentally, I think not. I found a school whose spiritual model is based on A Course in Miracles, and it's like an hour from where I live. I mean, what are those odds, right? And the whole thing is based on love. So the hypnotherapy type of, school and protocol I use is based on forgiveness and love. And so this model of healing their trauma so that they can remove that energetic charge and they can replace it with something else in their life. And so that's the biggest part of my work. I work with women one-on-one, but I am open to speaking. I, love just coming and talking to, my youngest girl is 15 years old. And she's made, by the way, phenomenal shifts and
Awesome.
changes in her life. So it's good to
Yeah, and I
start
was
young.
going to
That's
ask
all I
you
can
about the
say.
hypnotherapy, how you integrate that, and you beat me to it. And I was going to ask you about if it's individual or group. And I do think I've done some coaching in the past, and there's benefits of both, but there's an intimacy of like personalization that you can do one-on-one to where you can really dive deep, right? So that's cool. And how would people like get a hold of you? Like what's like how do they find you?
Yeah. So, I mean, the two ways I do use Instagram as my platform medium because it just seems simpler to me. So they can use my name, which is DE.DAY.love.
And real quick before you
love,
say the next
or
one,
they can go straight.
definitely follow her on Instagram. Amazing posts, videos that she shares, insights, very inspirational, fun. So yes, definitely follow her. Yeah.
Thank you for that. And my whole mission there is just to put out good value content that inspires somebody, whoever it helps. And then, or they can go to my website, which is just DE-DAY.com. They can learn, all kinds of things. They can get free downloads about how to improve your vibration and, and then they can contact me. There's ways to contact me. I'm very easily accessible. I love to help and serve in any way that I can. It's really important for me to say that I work with all kinds of people. That's very important to me. Ages, religions, unity is so huge. And if I might add, my childhood was very racist, and I'm like the opposite. I'm like, everybody is a rainbow. Everybody's a rainbow. Maybe the outside of their skin is this way, but inside we are all rainbows. And so, I love to work with all kinds. It doesn't matter what race, religion, or whatever you subscribe to. My job is to help really transform a person from where they are now to where they want to be. And whatever that looks like, it's just an honor to serve women and offer them, whatever I know. And I have to say, going into the Course in Miracles, I had another like amazing thing where I was in a place where a defining moment in my life where I felt not a dark night of the soul, Gavin, but I was confused.
Yeah.
I didn't know what to do, and I was reading, and I was on like page 76, by the way. And I was like, God, I'm teaching doTERRA. I'm spending so much time. I was doing well with the business, I might add, but I'm like, I wasn't sure. And I just like, what do you want me to teach? What do you want me to do? And this is my prayer. And literally, I flip the page, and it's like, not even 60 seconds after I ask this prayer, Gavin, I know you'll know this line, right? I think it's page 77. It says, teach only love, for that is what you are. And I literally fell to the ground crying, which, by the way, we probably don't have time, but the way I even came to A Course in Miracles is like a blow your mind.
Give it to us real quick. If you have time, I have time.
Okay. So anyways, teach only love, for that is what you are. That became my new thing. How can I teach and share love? So the story of that is, it's a pretty crazy one. I'll try to keep it short, but just know that this is as real can be. I started reading Wayne Dyer when I started becoming more spiritual. And one of the books he kept repeating was little inserts of A Course in Miracles. I read David Hawkins, and David Hawkins, who has since passed away, not the scientist, but the psychologist. And he talked about, basically the vibration of all of these things. And he mentioned A Course in Miracles and how that book had like a super high, vibrational, chart or whatever, or where it was on the chart. And I'm like, I've got to read this book, right? So I go to Goodwill, the book's like this big. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to buy the book for $2.99. I have it. And then 3 or 4 months down the road, I'm back at Goodwill. There's A Course in Miracles. I'm going to buy that book too. Meanwhile, I've never read the book. Then I go to fast forward another 3 or 4 months. I see a third A Course in Miracles. This has got a nicer cover. I'm going to read this book because it has a nicer cover, because it's daunting, right? I mean, let's be honest. Right. It's like 1,100 pages in totality, right? So it felt, and I've read the Bible. So I'm like, I don't know if I can do this, right? Meanwhile, I'm reading 10 books at a time. I buy a third book from Goodwill. Gets better. We go for 3 weeks on our family vacation in July. I bring this book everywhere I go, thinking, now's the time. I'm going to read this book, right? I towed it to California. I towed it to, Utah. I mean, I towed it all around. Never read the book. The kids get into school, and it's our second or third day at school. And I'm like, all right, I am going to read this book. I bring that book and another book that I had read a couple times, by the way, by Rhonda Byrne. I think it's called The Power, also a great book. And I take it down to the little beach, and I'm like, all right, I'm going to read this book. And I open it, and I can't open it. I just can't read it. And I close it, and I say a prayer, Gavin. I said, God, I know I'm supposed to read this book. Why can't I read this book? Give me a sign that I'm supposed to read this book. Maybe it's not for me, because it's very important to add that at this particular time in my life, I was going through a critical shift of getting out of a religion that was really going to ostracize me, okay, at that time, if I did anything that was, not aligned with what they believed in. So there was fear. There was fear that I was going to be doing something bad or reading a book that was not of God, that was not truth. I was scared. So I said, all right, so I put it away. I said my prayer. It's important to note, I did not read this book. I have to go pick up my kids. I go jump in my Jeep. I turn the thing. It doesn't start. I'm like, what the hell? I turn the key again. My car doesn't start. I have to pick up my little 6-year-old kid in like half an hour. I am freaking out. So I literally downloaded the Uber app. I called Uber. A woman, accepted my thing. She was there in 10 minutes. It's important to note that I was only about 1.5 miles from my house. She gets in the car and she's like, and I said, oh, what brings you here today? She's like, oh, I'm from like an hour and a half away. I've never been to Sarasota. I don't know why I'm here, but I definitely feel like, I do Uber because I'm always supposed to serve God. And there's always a reason why he brings me, to different places. And I said, oh, that's very interesting. I'm sure by the end of our 1.5 mile ride, we'll find out why God brought you today. Okay. So we exchange verses. What's your favorite verse? What's your favorite verse in the Bible? And I say, for me, it's Jeremiah 29:11. And we go, she pulls into my driveway and she said, not a word of a lie. She said, looks back. She said, have you ever read The Course in Miracles? You should do that. Right. My face went white. I couldn't talk, by the way. I actually had a physiological response. I pulled out the book. She looked at it and she said, well, I guess we know now why God sent me to you. And I, gave her money. I have chills. Yeah. Even now, I actually have a visceral response to this experience. I get out of the car. My legs make me feel, so a short walk to my old house, my legs make me feel like I'm going to fall down. And I get in the house and I'm literally shaking. I'm like crying. I'm like, all right, God, that was a sign. I will read this book. And not a word of a lie, Gavin, I started the next day. I was up every morning by 4:45, 5 a.m., something like that, down, stairs reading. It took me about 4 months to get through the entire volume, but I was dedicated. And I'm going to tell you, it was a miracle and it did shift my life and it did change things. Now I will tell you, I'd already made a lot of forgiveness in my life with other people, my mom, my dad. I had already had broached those forgiveness things with them, but there were so many other shifts, even understanding the ego, understanding the false self. These were things that I didn't understand and they completely transformed my life. So although I can't, I can say that it was a progression. I will say A Course in Miracles to me to this day. By the way, I've read each one of those books to this day. So I got all 3 and I have read each 3 of them, which is really funny. So it was really important. Spirit led me to that book. It knew it was gonna change me. And, I've learned so many wonderful, wonderful things. I know that I'm not a body. I know that I'm free. And I know I am exactly as God created me to be. And that has given me so much peace in my life. And I offer that to any woman who is in that place where they're ready to accept, or at least the potential of opening up to accept.
Well, I'm so glad we made time for that. What a story. That is a crazy story. Yeah. Oh my gosh. And it's like, I feel like God will be like, hey, if you're willing to listen, I will tell you, if you're aware and you want it and you're willing, right? Then the answers are everywhere. And obviously you're like, okay, I know I'm supposed to, but you needed a little bit of a nudge and you kept kind of convincing yourself. And then it was kind of like, enough's enough. I'm going to make this very obvious for Dee. Like, yeah.
Obvious, so obvious. I could not excuse that. And it's so important to say that I had fear. My fear was that I was doing something that God wouldn't approve of. So I need a signier sign, right? To tell me this is light. This is good. Read this. It's okay. And not only is it okay, but I did feel, for those of, who maybe don't know or do know, Jesus channeled that message. When I read these texts, I could feel as if, I can't even explain it really. It was just like, I felt like, Christ, Jesus himself was upgrading even my own consciousness to that of, Christ consciousness. And it truly was. It was beautiful. I told my husband, and who has not read this book, by the way, because like I said, it's not for everybody and everybody's not in the right place to read it. But I said, if or when I die before you, you have one thing you have to do. You have to read this book. And he's like, okay,
Well,
I will. So, because I believe
like we
it so
haven't talked
strong.
about it much here because I'd love to have another podcast in the future where we just talk nothing but A Course in Miracles, because it's just not something to just touch
Yes.
on to
Yeah.
me. Yet, it's my jam, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
I've read a ton of books too. I know you could definitely outdo me, for sure. Yet, and I
I know about that.
I resonate with a lot of different things, but here's my theory on A Course in Miracles. Because I was the same way when I first opened it up. I was like so like intrigued. I was so like, oh my gosh, and I was also scared shitless, right? Because why I think people
Yes.
avoid A Course in Miracles is because there's like this knowing within them that it's going to radically change them, and we are scared of that. Like
It's a fear,
like
right?
I've been
Mhm.
studying it for like 15
Mhm.
years, and I'll like, in the beginning I was dipping my toe in the beginning I was kind of reading it like a normal book, just kind of like grazing through it, and then I got into the workbook and doing the lessons, and then just over time I've dove into it more, and it's been scary because in a lot of ways when your ego is being challenged of what you think you are, and that's not what you are, then it's kind of like, well, then what am I, right? And then it starts
Yeah.
challenging you. I can say that I feel like, I don't know when it was, that it's like, you go up the mountain, and it's like I feel like some point I've like, reached the pendulum to where it's like, now it's like I don't have the fear around it, or like that I'm losing myself in it, that it's like I am going into the love of it. But I 100% get
Yeah.
why it's so resistant for so many people, and just reading it's kind of tough, right? But I feel like it goes beyond that. I feel like
Yeah.
what I've noticed for myself and a lot of people I've talked to, we use so many excuses, like they're drawn to it, but like, oh, I don't like the way it reads. I don't like how long it is. I don't like all this. When really at the core, it's kind of like, I know it's coming. I don't know if I'm ready, right? And so that's kind of
Yeah.
my
Right.
thoughts on A Course in Miracles, and I would love to have another conversation with you on this.
Yeah.
And I'm going to I'll put in the notes all your links. I would highly encourage
Mhm.
everyone to like her on Instagram, go check out her website, and if looking into her coaching, she is amazing, and I know she would help you, and help you get what you'd want to get through, and she's really gifted. So, Dee, thank you so much. First of all, thanks for being
Oh,
like a
thank you so
friend.
much.
Thanks for like, we didn't know anybody here, and like you started helping us, meet people in the book club and stuff, and then just taking your time and sharing your gifts, and the beauty that is Dee. So thank you so much, and I will uh, I'll give you that link for your T-shirt, but I'll also put all your notes and
Yes.
information so people can easily find you.
Thank you. And thank you for what you're doing, Gavin. Thank you for this platform. Thank you for, whoever, even if it's only one person or 10 people or a million people who hear, things that will help them along their journey. It's important. And so for you and your time and your effort to put this out there and to be brave to share these things, it's just awesome. So thank you so much for this experience, this opportunity. I'll look forward to our next jam, and we can dance around A Course in Miracles all day long if you want. I love that text. And yeah, so thank you so much. I appreciate it. And everybody just stop by and say hi. I love it when people, just send me a message and and connect.
Thank
It's
you,
wonderful.
Dee. So wasn't that fun? I feel that there's so many powerful nuggets. I loved her transparency, her authenticity, her willingness to share. Those are things that sometimes people can feel, shameful or guilty, or don't want other people to know, and that try to hide behind. And Dee has stepped into it. She's stepped into her power, and it's very inspirational. So, hoping you all are loving this podcast. Would love to hear from you. Like it, subscribe it. If you know how any of this works, like that you share it is powerful. Do you like it, that you leave a comment? Please ask a question. Myself or Dee can answer it, and I would just love to hear from you. This is the OneMent. I'm inviting you to join the OneMent, and one way you can do this, subscribe. You can get one of our t-shirts. none of that matters because you're already one. You're already part of the OneMent, whether you know it or like it or not. Everybody's a member. It's just those, some know it and some don't, right? So excited to have you here. Thank you again for your time. And I look forward to continuing this journey with you. And I'm going to be doing a lot more videos and sharing on the podcast. I'm doing this, I want to invite you to come along on this journey on returning to, who we really are, to returning to home with God and letting go of the illusions, of the fears, of the nonsense of this world so that we can experience, truth. So I will see you next time and I'll talk to you soon. Much love, my friends. Bye-bye.